Future trading involves risk and is not suitable for all investors. Content provided in this segment is meant for educational purposes and is not a solicitation to buy or sell commodities.
Hi, it's Steve and Joe from Fresh Agenda, MREG's Global Insights team. And Steve, we're back this week with a few bits and pieces, some market updates, GDT 374, which was an interesting one, and of course, Chart of the Week.
Yes, some brief market updates. Not a lot's been happening. Skimmer powder has lost some ground on futures after last week's dip on Pulse, the Pulse event, and still a bit above GDT before we went into this event. But also, Joe, whole milk powder's also shared.
Yeah, look, New Zealand futures for whole milk powder have also come down to earth a little bit. They were quite high after last week's Pulse, but they've sort of come back to where we were about 3 weeks back, Steve.
Good setting for the event.
Yes.
The other dynamic space is the oversupply of cream in the US, continuing to weaken the butter market because that cream's going to end up in bulk butter. And, this is well ahead of the US flush. It's not even crossing a dip there, but surely is pricing in some recovery in Californian output. Just to compare there, the spot, that's showing where nearby futures are. Spot market's at around $2.41 or about $5,300 a tonne. So quite weak and probably getting weaker. Okay, GDT 374. Some context first, Joe.
We're just looking at the offer volumes for skim milk powder, Steve, and you can just see, comparing those curves there, we've seen a bit of a shift in the curve for this current financial year and into next, with a bit more offered early in the season and a fair bit less now. Overall, offer volumes for skim milk powder are only 5% down for the year, but quite a different curve there, Steve.
Shaping, they call it.
And almost the opposite different for AMF. We've really seen in the last few events through this year that offer volumes for AMF have really been pumped up, and they're now projected to be 23% higher this season. So a lot more product and kind of the expected impact in terms of pricing, Steve.
Yeah. So the event gave us a lot of colour. So down overall 0.6%. Whole milk powder was flat. Skimmer powder lost 4.3 in the main contract, the C2 contract. There were small gains for European product, though, in the background. That's something we'll come back to. Butter up nearly 2%. Near 2.2%. And inside that, New Zealand product around 2.5%. We have some small volumes going European product, and that was flat. Cheddar dropped 3%. Young cheddar was down a little worse than that. But it merely traded the gains that were made last time. So it's gone back to where it was 2 events ago. European mozzarella, not very exciting, up a little bit, not more than 1%. But that's steadying, and it goes consistent with other things we're seeing in Europe at the moment because milk is tightening a little bit.
Yeah, just looking at across the demand and supply ratios here, Steve, and it's not all one way, really. I mean, there was a little bit stronger demand for whole milk powder, which explains why, it didn't move that much. A bit less for skim milk powder, butter demand quite strong, and AMF a little lower this event compared to that 4-year average. And just in terms of the involvement, we did see a tick up in terms of Chinese involvement in this event, increased to 44% share of the volume, on a higher tonnage offering as well. So that's a fairly positive takeaway, you'd have to say, Steve.
Yeah, certainly is.
The Middle East did drop off, as they want to do when prices get a little bit high. But, still not bad volumes at what are, compared to what we've seen in the last couple of years, fairly high prices for whole milk powder.
Yep. Skimmer powder lost some ground, not all the way back to events, and that might be occasions where it might be a little rougher than what it was and holding up later in that forward curve. But where that leaves us on GDT, you can see that New Zealand price came back towards the European pack. Arla price is quite weak, but have come up a little bit, and it was Solaric that lost volume. So a bit mixed there across results. Net terms, European product was a little better overall. In terms of skim milk powder sales, both major buying regions pulled back. So the Chinese lower involvement, there were a lot lower volumes offered. There was a reduction in the volumes offered this event, and this is quite disappointing because they actually came for less as well in percentage terms.
Yeah, Southeast Asian markets, fairly close to the line, but down on last events. Just displaying that sensitivity to pricing, Steve. So that pop up in prices in skim milk powder, it's probably scared a few people away.
Yeah, we talked about that on the last video. In case you missed it, there's a good coverage of that and why we think this is not a surprise.
So where does that put us in the wider context, Steve? Well, New Zealand has come back to the pack a little, but interestingly, on skim milk powder futures and the GDT results quite aligned there, Steve, but obviously a bit higher than every other major region, coming back to the pack later in the year though. And in terms of butter, it's kind of
Do you like this one?
yeah, there's GDT up there in the lighter blue line, sort of close to EEX, and NZX futures are quite aligned for the first half of 2025, and obviously CME well below those comparisons. And we love this chart. AMF has now hit a record discount on GDT. You can just see that line plunging all the way down there, Steve, as AMF prices, the butterfat equivalent is quite low compared to butter at the moment.
You would think that would start to turn demand around.
You would think so, absolutely. And then this other great one, the synthesized comparison of whole milk powder with the comparatives in New Zealand, skim milk powder and AMF, and EU skim milk powder and AMF. And you can just see that differential between the New Zealand and EU product, but whole milk powder well above both comparatives. So that price premium has just edged up a little higher this time around.
Yeah, and you wonder how long that can last, because looking at that history, it hasn't been up there for long in the past.
That's right.
Okay, EU production, when the Eurostat people put out their production numbers, they put out both milk production and product output. So there's a bit to digest in all that. We've combed through it and pulled out some highlights. EU milk was flat in December after a pretty strong growth in November. That was on weak comparatives. This time, though, it's still quite a mixed bag. That took 2024 collections up 0.6% against the prior year. The other thing to report is that while milk was flat, so were milk solids, but there's plenty of detail there that is interesting. Quite a mixed bag, though, when you look at regions, Joe.
Yeah, just looking at those different regions, we had the growth that we talked about a couple of weeks ago, perhaps, in Ireland, which was plus 30% against really terrible comparatives, but also growth out of Poland, but weak in major producing country, Germany, down 4.3%, France down a fraction, just down 0.9% in the latest. Solids, as you said, Steve, were equal with milk. Protein was down 0.8% with flat milk output. Netherlands protein was down 8% for December, with fat being flat. Milk was down only 0.6%, which seems very odd. We checked that with the source data in the Netherlands. Could be revised.
Look out for that.
Yeah, but a very strange result. So, yeah, one to watch.
When we look at product changes, again, no real changes here, but I guess with milk being flat, Joe, and we see fluid up, see cheese up a bit. So expect to see a little less skim milk powder, and certainly whole milk powders join that party as well. But butter up well probably lends to the story about cream and perhaps the type of cheese being made here. We don't get a lot of granularity on that, but there's certainly cream demand backed off before the end of the year, and that's probably what bolstered that number there. So yeah, quite odd as you go across that page. A nice little pat in the mood, so there as it sort of declines to the right. So bringing us home now, Joe, chart of the week, what have you got?
Yeah, and just sticking in Europe for the time being, Steve, we're just looking at some of the EU trade data. EU trade was down 1% in milk solids equivalent terms. Skim milk powder actually improved 2.4% year on year, although it was down for the quarter by 2.2%. Cheese was up slightly, flat for the quarter. Butter trade, was up 2.4%, but the US butter trade slowed, which has been a feature in the EU trade lately. WPC 80 continued to be strong, up 31% for the month of December and 21% for the December quarter. So quite good demand for that product. Dry whey was up 6%. The percentage changes are pretty interesting there, Steve. obviously the whole milk powder well down in line with production. But interesting that skim just poked up a little bit in December.
Yeah, I guess end of year. I mean, we know the EU producers are trying to keep their cheese market managed, and that might mean from time to time they put a bit more into ingredients. But in terms of exports, picking up a little because of that, probably that price advantage we've seen recently. That's certainly led a bit of growth here. Not that there's much of a trend you could pick up when we drove into the detail of trade. There's nothing stunning there, but it might have helped have that advantage.
That's right. And then just looking, percentage changes are one thing. They make things look pretty dramatic, but this is the milk solids equivalent change in exports for 2024. So some interesting trends there. North America, a lot of growth in North America, mostly cheese and butter, I think, Steve. And that could reflect a fair bit of front loading, sort of getting in front of the threatened tariffs from the Trump administration. A bit of growth in sub-Saharan Africa, but you can just see in Middle East with skim milk powder and butter, the bulk of that trade, well down for December and for the last few periods.
So they're the percentages, and when you look at actual volumes in milk solids equivalent, it's a slightly different story, but pretty stark when you see the comparisons there, Joe.
Yeah. Again, North America with a lot of growth there, but the reversal in terms of Middle Eastern shipments is pretty stark there, isn't it, Steve?
Yeah. So that's the 2024 year. We'll be putting together an annual trade insights fairly soon, but this will be part of those highlights to where markets have shifted. Don't forget to look out for that offer we have on our new Global Insights products, a range of products there. You can go to our Fresh Agenda YouTube channel to see a little promo video we've shot, Joe, just to give you an understanding of what that is. Please follow us up if you're interested in that. For now, that's all for the plug, and that's all for the video. We'll be back same time next week. Thank you.